has like a digital format, and I do other like Magic Gathering stuff. But today, I've just been dying to talk about the Dune series for a long time. So today I'm just going to be doing kind of a summary and just like talking about the first 4 books in the Dune series. So for any of those of you who are fans of Dune, it's just a video you can listen to my summary. For those of you who haven't read Dune and might be interested, this is obviously going to include major spoilers. Don't watch. But for those of you who maybe like Dune, but you'd never figure you're going to read all the books or what have you, maybe you saw the movie and you like it, or the movies. There's also a show, I think, that I've never seen. Actually, it had James McAvoy in it, which is pretty insane. I had no idea that there was like a show and that a major actor had portrayed a character I really like. But neither here nor there. So if you like Dune and you think you're going to be interested in reading these books, I would highly recommend stopping watching now, and reading before you go back, because I'm basically just going to be doing a summary to the best of my knowledge. This is not pre-recorded. I don't have a script written, so this is all going to be off the top of my head. I'll miss things. I'll forget things. So for big fans, if I miss things, I apologize. I could go through and like do a well-prepared video and blah blah blah, but I kind of wanted to do a very stream of consciousness and kind of thinking on the fly. So, but yeah, if you want to read these books, if you're interested in Dune, and it is a great series, I would highly recommend it. Don't watch this video if you don't think you're ever going to read the books, or you're not interested, or you're just looking for something. You're just looking to listen to somebody talk about something for half hour, an hour, however long this takes. Then this could potentially be a video for you. So I originally read these books a long time ago, back in high school. I forgot most of the stuff that happened. And then when, I want to say back in 2015, I decided to buy a copy. I was living in New York City at the time. I decided to buy a copy to read on the train on the way to work, and just read in general. And I fell back in love with Dune. So this is the copy I bought back in like 2015 or 2016 maybe. And then I didn't reread the entire series again, and then I just decided last year I wanted to reread the whole series, so I reread Dune, and then I got Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor, and I'm rereading Heretics of Dune right now. But yeah, it's a really great series. Obviously, there's the new movie, and then the next one that's coming out this year for Dune, which were great. There's the original movie. I think it was David Lynch directed it back in like the 80s, and it's something. It's got its ups, it's got its downs, but so does the new one. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a huge fan of like Zendaya or Timothée Chalamet. How when you see a character in your mind when you're reading like a book, and then you see like how they're, who portrays them, and it just doesn't agree with what you saw. Timothée Chalamet never came to my mind as like a Paul, and Zendaya, I don't know. She is a good Johnny, but like, I don't know, it doesn't vibe with the one I had in my head. Also, when I first read Dune, I thought that the Fremen were like aliens, and then upon rereading, in 2015, I was like, no, they're not aliens. When I was a kid, so I read this back in like high school, or maybe probably high school, probably like freshman year of high school, and I thought the Fremen were aliens, and then, so it was weird, the concept of like, I thought they were like humanoid aliens, so I did like, there's a lot of discussion about breeding, and like, obviously Children of Dune is about, like children, so, somebody had to procreate to make those children, so it was just weird for me to think about like people breeding with was, it's sci-fi, it happens. And then it was like later that I kind of, obviously upon rereading, I was like, they're not aliens. Fremen are a race of people who live on the planet Dune. We'll get into all that. I guess I probably kind of have to set the stage with the first one. But anyway, yeah, going back to the movies, they just didn't strike me as like the like when I thought of him. Josh Brolin, again, great actor. I think he did really well in the role, but like physicality and just like how he looked didn't really match. But like I think he embodied the role pretty well. Duncan Idaho as Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho was actually like pretty great. I think that was like a fantastic casting. Despite the fact that I mean he's not a bad actor. I just don't think he's like the best actor, but like he's pretty good. I think he's like a better The Rock, like big tough guy, but like can actually act in movies. It's like what The Rock wishes he could be. Although that being said, I never saw Fast and whatever. I've never seen any of the Fast and Furious movies, so like I don't know how he was in the most recent Fast and Furious or whatever, but I know that obviously like Aquaman doesn't have a great reputation, but I thought he was great in Dune, and I thought he was great in Game of Thrones. I thought he has like some show called like Frontier that was pretty good, and doesn't he have another show called like Sea that I've heard is pretty good, but neither here nor there. I thought that was great casting. I thought Oscar Isaac as Leto was amazing. I thought Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, amazing. Whoever played Dr. Yue was really good. And then Stellan Skarsgård as the Baron. That was like surprising to me. I love Stellan Skarsgård. I think he's such a good actor. If you saw Chernobyl, like he was great in Chernobyl. Obviously, he's in the Pirates of the Caribbean. I thought he was great in those. He was in Thor. Doesn't play like a major role, but like I think he's a really good actor. And I was so intrigued when they cast him as Vlad Harkonnen, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. In the movie, they pronounce it Harkonnen. I refuse. I've always read it and understood it to be Harkonnen, a hard like K-O, Harkonnen, as opposed to Harkonnen, and you just kind of like miss that middle O. But yeah, I always said Harkonnen, but like Stellan Skarsgård as and we'll get into who these characters are as I talk through these. But Stellan Skarsgård, I was like so interested because when you think of the Baron, I don't know, like it, and the way they end up depicting him, I think, is interesting. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. And then that actor who played, what's his name? Peter, right? Peter DeVries or whatever his name is, the Mentat for the Harkonnens. I just said it, Harkonnen. The Mentat for the Harkonnens. He was also in Blade Runner. He was in the other, Villeneuve. He was in Blade Runner 2049. He played like one of the, forensic scientists. He was also in Prisoners. And he was also in Dark Knight. He was in the Christopher Nolan. He was in Dark Knight not Dark Knight Rises. It would have been The Dark Knight, right? He was like one of the psycho like devotees of the Joker or something. Or was that? I can't remember. I don't know the actor's name, which is a shame because he's a really good actor. He was also in Suicide Squad. He was like the polka dots guy. One of the Suicide Squads. I don't know which one that was, the good one or the bad one. They were both kind of pretty bad, but either way, like I think for the to be clear, I think the movie Dune by Denis Villeneuve, the director, I think it's great. I just when I guess the whole point of this is me getting to the point of like, when you picture a character in your mind and then like the actor doesn't just fit that mold. For Johnny and Paul, who are Zendaya and Timothy Chalamet, respectively, they just weren't it for me, unfortunately. But like, you know, when I like think about Lord of the Rings, like anytime you see an intellectual property that you're passionate about and that you love, you want to see, or maybe it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Like when I reread Lord of the Rings, I only ever see those characters as the actors now, which is a compliment to the movie, but it's a bad thing for me because I can't remember what my Aragorn and my Frodo and my Sam looked like, my Smeagol, my Gandalf, my Arwen. Like, all of those things are gone and are permanently replaced by the actors. I just cannot see those characters as anything but those actors anymore because it was just so brilliantly and well done. Legolas, Orlando Bloom, you know, all that stuff. So the problem with Dune, and I guess not the problem, but I'm happy with the way the Lord of the Rings characters turned out because I think that they are great representations of who those characters are, and each actor filled those roles so well. And with Dune, like, I'm losing my Paul because anytime I think about Dune now, I think about the movies and then Timothy Chalamet, and that's not who I want to think of. So like, it's I guess it's a blessing and a curse when it goes well because you lose the characters that were yours. But I'm so thankful that those characters were done well for Lord of the Rings. So I'm fine with thinking of Vigo as Aragorn now. The problem with Dune is, like, you know, it's been so long since I've had to picture Paul, and now when I think of Paul, I think of Timothy Chalamet, and that's just not who. It doesn't feel right, and it's nothing against him. I think he's an okay actor, but to be honest, I don't think he's a great actor. But he's not bad. I mean, there could have been a lot worse, but it's kind of disappointing when it's not who you wanted it when it doesn't like embody who you thought the character was. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. The movie is fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I think it did. It was very loyal to the source material and changed small things where it needed to change. And honestly, the hardest part of covering Dune, the first book, as a movie or as a show, is the first half, because the first half is slow and it's very world building, very, you know, very methodical, and like the reason you keep reading it even though it's kind of slow and dull and you know, very setup-y, is because you start getting entrenched in the world. And then the second half, so the second movie, this is advice for, or not advice, but this is kind of to let you guys know, second movie's gonna be great. Second movie, like, and almost I feel like every single Dune book that I've read kind of goes like this, where I feel like the first half is kind of long and sets a lot of stuff up, and then the second half flies by. Like, I swear to God, like, the first half of Dune it felt like it took a week, and then the second half felt like it took a day, and that's how it felt for almost every one of them, except for Messiah. Messiah is, we'll get to it, but Messiah is a bore fest, except for the ending. So like, Messiah drags until like the last 2 chapters, but the rest of them, they all kind of like drag, and then like the second half flies by. Alright, so let's get into it. And again, we're only covering the first 4 books, so we're going from Dune to God Emperor of Dune, being the 4th book, Heretics being the 5th, and then I think Chapter House is the 6th. 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Chapter House is the last one. And then there are other books by like Brian Herbert, who is Frank Herbert, the author's son. I don't know if I have any interest in reading those, but we'll see. Alrighty. Dune. All of these obviously written by Frank Herbert in the, I believe, 70s and 80s. So Dune. I think before we kind of dig into the meat and potatoes of the book itself and the story, it's important to kind of set up the universe. The universe of Dune takes place, I think, like maybe tens of thousands of years after present day. Guys, I'm not fact-checking myself. This is all kind of off the fly, but basically in a very distant future, the world, or the universe has expanded. Humans are living on, colonizing other planets. Earth is a long-forgotten memory. So the main players in the universe are we'll start with the Emperor. So at the time that Dune takes place, the known universe is ruled by the Emperor Padisha something. It's like Padishah something, whatever. And I believe he is of the Carino family. But I don't really think they kind of go into that name. But the Padisha Emperor is the Emperor of the known universe. So he rules the known universe. He rules over major and minor houses, which are families that rule over planets. They might rule over multiple planets, but based on kind of my understanding of some of the major houses, it seems like it's kind of like one family per planet. So I think it might be called like a fief when a family is given like dominion over a planet type of thing. I might be misusing that word. Again, there's a lot of words that have like, translated meanings, like a lot of, I don't know if they're made up, but so that's the Emperor, and he rules over the major and minor houses. Some major and minor houses for you to know the names of are the Atreides. The Atreides is the family of the main character, Paul. They're considered, relatively good people, I guess, or at the very least, they're considered people who inspire loyalty and who are seen as being people who, do good by their people and are good leaders. The reason for the whole kind of unfolding that happens in Dune is because the Emperor starts getting jealous, or kind of jealous and worried about his position, because he thinks the Atreides are becoming too respected, too powerful. So he makes some moves that kind of sets him off balance, and then the events of the book take place. So that's the Atreides, good people. Inspire loyalty, very good fighters. They have they're very well trained. They fight very well, and they're considered people who do well by the people they rule over. So on the planet that they're given. The head of the house is Duke Leto Atreides, and he has a concubine. So he's not married to, but he has a very serious girlfriend, a concubine. Her name is Lady Jessica. We'll get into the relevance of who she is and what faction she comes from shortly. Another major house that you need to know is the Harkonnens, who we discussed earlier, led by the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. These are considered bad people. They subjugate. Is that the right word? They're very oppressive. They have a very, oppressive culture. He rules with an iron fist. The Baron himself is morbidly obese. Partakes obviously in gluttony, in lust. Like name the 7 deadly sins. He's done all of them: murder, lust. There are insinuations that he is a pedophile. In the earlier books, there's a lot of insinuations about homosexuality, and kind of, like in some of the later books, it kind of discusses homosexuality in like a positive and negative sense. Again, this was written in the 70s. I don't know if the Baron's homosexuality, it's implied that he's homosexual, or at the very least, not homosexual. He might be bi or pan. He might just be like he might just be very lustful. But there's one specific line that references him having an inclination to be a pedophile, and his target is a young boy. So essentially, you get the picture: vile, terrible people, oppressive environment, their leader is a bad person. So yeah, that's the Harkonnens. So you have good versus evil. Good, Atreides. Harkonnen, evil. And then there's another major house, the Fenrings. Or I should actually, we'll go to, yeah, the Fenrings. Don't play a major role. Just like an old friend, like the Count Fenring, the leader of the Fenring household, is an old friend of the Emperor, and doesn't really play a major role. But I think it may be important to note. And then the last major house is the Corrinos, who is the house of the Emperor himself. I can't remember what planet he rules over. I always thought so. His home planet might be Salasa Secundus. So, we'll go over. So, the Atreides house, their planet is Caladan, or Caladan. The Harkonnen planet is Giedi Prime. Giedi Prime. Giedi, I think. Giedi Prime. And then the Corrino planet might be Salasa Secundus. I always interpreted Salasa Secundus being a prison planet, almost like in Australia, but a planet. Sorry, Australia. But it might also be the planet that they come from, and there might be like a massive prison population there. But basically, the Corrinos rule that planet, and they have an army that, from my understanding, I thought that they had a prison planet where they trained these prisoners to become super soldiers. Not super soldiers, but really strong soldiers. Kind of like a survival of the fittest. It's like a really harsh environment planet type of thing. And those super soldiers for Corrino, or for the Emperor, are called Sardaukar. And then collectively, the houses, major and minor, are known as the Landsraad. So those are kind of the major players. And then we have like different races of people, who will, some are important in Dune, some become important later in the later series. So the first one that we'll mention is the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit are a faction, a matriarchal and female, I think, I wouldn't even say dominated, but it's like a female-only society it's a society of women, that are exceptionally intelligent and perceptive. And there's another aspect of their intelligence that we'll get into a little bit later. And essentially what they're trying to do is, through selective breeding, create something they call the Kwisatz Haderach, which is essentially a super being, a super mind. So they have these abilities, and they have the ability to delve into the memories and knowledge of the previous Bene Gesserit. So they can actually utilize the knowledge of their ancestors, type of thing. I don't know I don't think it's at all times, but the Kwisatz Haderach that they're trying to create. So through selective breeding, they'll have certain members of their order breed with, select members of houses major and minor to create, what they consider further steps towards this Kwisatz Haderach. So eventually, at some point in the breeding process, they will create a male who has the ability to harness the memories of all of the Bene Gesserit women. Reverend mothers are typically like the if you it's like a status. So if you're a Bene Gesserit, you can be like, I guess lower status, just a regular Bene Gesserit. And then once you become a Reverend Mother, you have to pass a specific test by ingesting something, I think. And then that's when you kind of open your mind to your ancestry to gain their knowledge and whatnot. If you do that, if you pass that test, you become a Reverend Mother. There essentially would create a male Reverend Mother that would have like this super intelligence. And the important thing is, he would not only be able to refer back to the knowledge of his ancestors, but also would unlock the power of prescience, seeing the future, or interpreting multiple futures, type of thing. So that is the Bene Gesserit, and that is their ultimate goal. They also, well, I mean, yeah, that is them. That's their ultimate goal. Then there's the Tully Laxu, who are like cloners, not really clones, but like they have a faction within themselves of face dancers, who are people who can kind of change their appearance to look like anything and become anything. And then they also are very adept at like, it's not cloning necessarily, but it's almost like in Blade Runner, where they create the replicants. So they can grow human beings, and specifically human beings that have already existed from the dead flesh. So they're not zombies. It's like a regrown human using the DNA of a previous one. So it's not necessarily cloning. It's called a Jola or a Gola. I don't know. But yeah, so that's the Tully Laxu. Then there's the Ix, who are really good with creating computers and machines and stuff like that. And then later on in Heretics of Dune, which we won't get into, there's the Honored Matres. But that's not important right now. But I would say those are kind of the breakdown of the major like races and factions and players. And then, so one of the most important aspects of Dune and the later novels is this resource in the known universe of the Dune universe called melange, and it's referred to as the spice. I'll call it the spice because I don't want to say melange. The spice is something you can ingest that will allow you to achieve a higher intellect, and it prolongs life. So it also, and one of its other uses, the Spacing Guild and Chome, those are other two factions I should get into. We'll get back to that. But basically, the spice is something that can prolong life and lets you perceive the future, lets you perceive reality in an alternate hyper-intelligent way, which makes it the most expensive and the most important resource in the known universe. And the spice only comes from one planet. That planet is called Arrakis. And Arrakis was given to the Harkonnens, whose homeworld again was Gedi Prime, but I guess you can rule over multiple planets. And they were given dominion over Dune to produce and harvest the spice for distribution among the other houses, major, minor, and obviously Prophet, blah blah blah. Obviously, the Bene Gesserit highly value the spice as it helps them perceive the future and whatever it is they need to do to try to make the Kwisatz Haderach, and obviously it helps you live longer. Everybody wants to live longer. The Spacing Guild is a guild of mutated humans that are so addicted to spice that they permanently need to reside in tanks that are filled with the spice. And the reason they constantly use spice is because they need it to help navigate the stars. So another reason why it's so important is because it helps the Spacing Guild to traverse and navigate the universe, which is obviously ever expansive, ever expanding. So they need to be able to travel, otherwise you won't be able to get from planet to planet. So it's an incredibly valuable resource for that reason. And then Chome, I never really understood what Chome was. I think it's some sort of like market trade guild type thing. I'm not 100% sure. But those are other major factions. So yeah, the produce and cultivate spice. So as the novel opens, the emperor has ordained, or not ordained, maybe that's not the right word, but the emperor has declared that the Harkonnens are to give up their dominion over Dune, over Arrakis, and the Atreides are supposed to take it over from them. And obviously, you would think if he's trying to displace and take down the Atreides because he's nervous and jealous of their gaining position and their gaining favor, why would he give them Arrakis, the key to the most powerful, or the most valuable resource in the known universe? And as you come to understand, the Emperor gave the Atreides the planet Dune, as I think the Baron says, one is a gift, not a gift. You think he's giving them Arrakis as a gift, but in reality he knows that the Harkonnens will fight to take it back. And he has, as you'll come to understand, the Emperor fully supports the Harkonnens going back and fighting the Atreides to take Arrakis, Dune, back. But we'll get there. So the Atreides are told they need to go to Arrakis and take it over. As they are preparing to leave, they're preparing to leave. But the novel opens with you meeting the main character, Paul. He is the son of the head of the Atreides house, Leto. The son, main character being Paul, the protagonist of the first novel, or first book, or I guess 2 books, right? Because it's split into 2 books. Anyway, so Paul Atreides is the main character, son of Leto and Lady Jessica. Lady Jessica is a Bene Gesserit. I said we would get into that, but she was supposed to mate with Leto and produce a daughter. That was part of the Bene Gesserit plan with the Atreides. They wanted a daughter, and then that daughter, I think, would be bred with, I forget who, but it might have been Fade Routha, but doesn't matter. She was supposed to produce a daughter and didn't, and the Bene Gesserit are pretty upset with her because, one, they think she's arrogant enough to believe that she could produce the male Quasi-Tzaddarak, the male Reverend Mother, or they just think she's irresponsible and gave in to feelings of love for Leto, which is kind of true. She did. She loves Leto. Leto loves her. He wanted a son. She produced a son, and that is Paul. Paul is he's good at fighting. He's smart. He's inquisitive, and he's trying. As he learns that they have to move to Arrakis, he starts reading what are like holofilms, like holographic films and stuff. Learning about the planet, learning about the sandworms. The sandworms are giant. Dune is a desert planet, and the spice is in the sand of that desert. It's entirely a desert, and the planet itself has sandworms that traverse the surface and under the surface of the planet. They're giant, huge, like 70 meters, 50 meters. They're these giant sandworms, and they can eat entire they could eat an entire sand crawler, which is kind of think of maybe like the from Star Wars, like the thing that Jawas go into. Think of like not that exactly, but it's kind of like a slow crawling machine that is used to harvest spice. So yeah, I can like eat one of those in like one bite, and the native people think of them almost as gods because, if a worm arrives, you're dead. You have to be very careful not to disturb the sand and stuff like that to avoid them. But yeah, so he learns about the planet, he learns about the sandworms. And at one point, before they're preparing to leave, the Lady Jessica, his mother, has a Reverend Mother visit her, and she says that she is going to, and that Reverend Mother's name is something Mohiam, Reverend Mother Mohiam. She comes to Caladan to test Paul. And this test is a test to determine if he is human. So what he has to do is put his hand in a box, and as he puts his hand in the box, the Reverend Mother raises a needle to his neck that is a poisoned needle, and if she stabs him with it, he will die instantly. And she said she would stab him if something happens. And as he has his hand in the box, he feels incredible pain, and he endures it, and then she says that he has passed the test. So the test was, is he human? And she was saying that if an animal experiences pain, it will do whatever it can to relieve that pain. And so because he was able to endure it, and it's later noted that he endured more pain than like any test subject she'd ever tested before or something like that, but basically he endures it. She considers him human, and she basically tells Jessica, like, we'll keep an eye on him, we'll do the best that we can for him to prepare his way. But, you know, we don't know. He's probably not the Kwisatz-Haderach. We don't think he is, but we'll do our best for him to survive. And there's kind of like a note that, like, they're like, yeah, we've done all we can for him, but we can't save the father, which implies that, you know, they have some sort of perception that the father is doomed. And admittedly, you know, everybody kind of knows. Everybody kind of knows that what the Emperor is doing by giving the Atreides Arrakis Dune, it's going to cause infighting and there will be a fight. So everybody's kind of assuming something's going to happen. So even the Duke himself is aware that Duke Leto Atreides, the father of Paul, he's aware that, like, his life is in danger. But I think the Bene Gesserit might be more aware that there are plans within plans to get him killed, as opposed to just, like, there's going to be conflict. I think the Bene Gesserit are more aware that, like, you know, there's a bit more going on. So yeah, Paul passed the test, he's considered human, and then they need to leave for Arrakis. Meanwhile, on Giedi Prime, which is the homeworld of the Harkonnens, Vlad, the Baron Harkonnen, is very upset, obviously, that he lost Dune, but is fully aware that the Emperor is going to help him retake it, and thereby kill the Atreides. The Emperor has given the Harkonnens 2 legions, or, you know, some amount, a fair amount of Sardaukar, his personal army, who are, like, they're really good warriors. They're considered the best in the universe, but you will find out that that is not true. The Sardaukar are, well, they're considered possibly the best in the universe. The Atreides are considered really good. There is a third group of people who I haven't mentioned yet. We'll mention them soon. But those third group of people end up being the best. But anyway, the Emperor has promised us, you know, a large number of Sardaukar to help the Harkonnens retake Dune. But anyway, the Baron is kind of stewing, and there's a lot of exposition, and he kind of explains that he has plans within plans to retake Dune. And he's discussing this with his nephews, I believe. One is Beast Rabban, who is like his name would suggest, he's kind of a brute, and he's dumb. He's a dumb brute, Beast Rabban. And then there's Fade Rautha, who's considered more cunning, more clever, but also just as deadly. And he's kind of discussing with them how they're going to retake Dune. And what he ends up explaining is they have a traitor within the Atreides ranks, who ends up being the Doctor, Dr. Yue. But basically, you know, they have Dr. Yue's wife as leverage, and so they will be utilizing him in some capacity to betray the Atreides and then retake Dune. So, you know, the Atreides get to Dune, get to Arrakis, and they need to start producing and harvesting spice, and all of the, you know, everything left behind by the Harkonnens is in disrepair. They're barely going to be able to produce anything with what was left behind. And the people of Dune have this idea that a Messiah will come to their planet, and that idea was planted by the Bene Gesserit a long time ago. They call their Messiah Lisan al-Gaib, I believe. Lisan al-Gaib. But yeah, they have a belief that a Messiah will come to Dune. It's said that, like, you know, he'll come to Dune. He'll be an off-worlder, but you know, he'll see the ways of the people of Dune as if they were his own, and all these other things that, like, Paul encompasses. So it's very clear that, like, people on Dune, people on Arrakis, think Paul might be Lisan al-Gaib, might be the Messiah. But yeah, everything is in disrepair, and you know, things aren't going all that well, and they need to get spice production on track. And there are people, the people of Dune, what's the word? It starts with an I. The indigenous population of Dune are the Fremen. And the Fremen are the people that have this idea of the Lisan al-Gaib and a Messiah. And it is believed that there is not many Fremen, and that they're lowly and whatever, and some of them live out in the desert, and, like, it's just not considered that they're, you know, of importance, but it ends up they are. And a representative, an ecologist that works for the Emperor, was sent to Dune and kind of becomes a Fremen. She becomes entrenched with, you know, the Fremen culture and society, which isn't difficult. They're a very sturdy, very hardy bunch of people. But she becomes ingratiated, or she becomes accepted amongst what's called a sietch, or, you know, a living place of the Fremen. Well, it's not she in the books, it's a he. In the movie, it's a she. But the ecologist has this belief, this dream that eventually Dune, Arrakis, will become no longer a desert planet, but will be filled with trees and water and life and, you know, plants, vegetation. But that ecologist is essentially assigned to kind of give the Atreides, Leto, Paul, and their entourage she isn't charged with giving him a tour. Leto, Atreides, asks to meet the ecologist, who's Liet Kynes. He asks to meet them so they can do kind of a tour and kind of see how spice production goes, and they agree to it. And upon meeting, the ecologist notices that, let's backpedal a little bit. The Fremen, we'll focus on the Fremen for a sec. So the Fremen are an incredibly survivalist, hardy people. They've survived in the harsh desert environment of Dune for who knows how long. And they've developed still suits, which are suits that you wear in the desert. They have a mask and they cover your entire body, and essentially all excess moisture that is produced by your body, they catch it and they allow it to become water that you can then drink. So it's a way for you to kind of capture all the moisture available, because water is one of the most important resources on Dune, because there's so little of it. So as they are preparing to go on their tour, Liet Kynes notices that Paul knew how to fashion his boots and put on the still suit, as if he had done it before, as if he was a Fremen. And that's kind of one of the things, one of the traits of Lisan al-Gaib, is that he'll take to your culture as if it was his own, as if he was born to it. So, like, all these prophecies are being fulfilled, blah, blah, blah. And then on the tour, essentially, they take what's called an ornithopter. So think of a helicopter, but instead of a rotating upper blades, they have them out on the sides and they flutter almost like a dragonfly. So an ornithopter flies out with Leto, Liet Kynes, and some of the Atreides entourage. One named Gurney Halak, which really doesn't really matter, honestly. Gurney Halak, he's like an expert old sword trainer. And then there's Duncan Idaho, who is very important. And you'll know why throughout all 4 fucking novels. But Duncan Idaho is like a warrior. He was sent with a forward party to Dune to Arrakis to meet the Fremen, because Leto thinks that the Fremen, unlike the Harkonnen, who subjugated and oppressed and killed Fremen whenever they could, Leto thinks he can befriend and work with the Fremen. So he sends Duncan Idaho as part of a forward party as, like, you know, a loyal and powerful warrior. And Duncan gets accepted by the Fremen and blah, blah, blah. But basically those are kind of his entourage. Gurney Halleck, Duncan Idaho are like two very loyal subjects of the Atreides. And, you know, both powerful warriors and strategists. So this ornithopter with Leto, it might be Leto. And then, Leto, it might just be Leto, Gurney, and then there's another guy, Thufir Hawat, whatever. But basically, as they're going on this tour, they see that one of these sand crawlers that's harvesting spice, they see that a worm is going to attack it. And again, these sandworms can kill it, and so typically what happens is the sand crawler has something called a carryall, which is a flying device that inflates, you know, balloons that help it lift from the sand so a sandworm can't eat it. As they're watching, the carryall has a malfunction, and the crawler will inevitably, with its crew, be eaten. And Leto decides to save the crew and fly away. As they're saving the crew, Paul inadvertently ingests spice as it's being harvested. And as he ingests the spice, that unlocks, and potentially is the catalyst for what makes him potentially become the Kwisatz Haderach. So the hyperintelligence and the prescience and all that stuff starts to happen. It's not all at once. It's not like he just instantly has all those abilities, but like it starts to unlock those abilities within his mind. So he kind of has like an episode and whatever, but like, yeah, he starts to unlock those abilities. He starts to be able to see things and perceive possible futures and stuff like that. So then they go back, and another thing to note that I forgot is there's a kind of people known. There's a kind of people who are trained to become what's called a mentat, which is essentially just a person with a brain as powerful as a computer. They can do calculations really quick. They can, they can read body language. They're just hyper intelligent. They're super, super intelligent, and their brain is like a supercomputer, kind of like a Kwisatz Haderach, but like they can do calculations. They can read the present, but they can't reach into the knowledge of the past and like see the future or anything like that. The reason why those people exist, way back, there was something called the Butlerian Jihad. Basically, like, computers got to a point where they were so powerful, people were afraid they would take over. So it became outlawed to have computers. So people had to take that place. So that's what a mentat essentially is. It's a person computer, human computer. But anyway, that Thufir Hawat is the mentat for the Atreides. Peter DeVry, whatever. I don't know. He's the mentat for the Harkonnen. So yeah, Paul has these visions and starts to unlock the hyperintelligence of the Kwisatz Haderach. It's not clear if he actually is, or if it's some sort of mistake. But either way, he starts becoming hyperintelligent and being able to see possible futures. He can't see into the past yet, though, I don't think, but he can start seeing possible futures. So one night when they're on Arrakis, they are attacked by the Harkonnens in a surprise. Basically, Dr. Yue, who was the traitor amongst the Atreides, puts down what's called the shield wall. So there's like a shield over the city that they're in, and he takes that down, and the Harkonnen enter the city and start attacking and killing the Atreides legions, and the Sardaukar, who are the Emperor's people, help them. Paul and Leto, the Jessica are supposed to be killed and then thrown into the desert. And they are able to escape. Duncan is able to escape. And Gurney Halleck is able to escape. But Paul and Jessica are driven out to the desert. In the desert, they find Duncan Idaho, who has told the ecologist about the attack. Tells the ecologist that they should tell the Landsrat that, what's happened here. But like, the ecologist is like, what do you want me to do? Like, I work for the Emperor. He basically is begrudgingly saying he can't do it. But so they all end up meeting up, and it becomes clear that Paul has these possible future visions and has some sort of like hyper perception. He's able to perceive that like Keynes, the ecologist, had like a woman that he loved, and like, he basically says like, I can see a future where I become Emperor of the known universe, and I can make Arrakis the planet that you want it to be. And then they're set upon by Sardaukar. Duncan Idaho basically sacrifices himself to hold them off. He kills like a bunch of them, and then it finally dies. And that moment is actually really important, because Duncan Idaho might be dead, but he might not be. So he sacrifices himself to give them time. Paul and Jessica basically go out into the desert to escape the Sardaukar. They go into a sandstorm, but they survive. And then eventually are wandering and found by the Fremen, who are the people I discussed before. And it's discovered before this that there's a lot more Fremen than originally thought. The Harkonnen thought there were like 50,000. Turns out there's like 2 million or something like that. But basically there's a lot of Fremen living in the desert, and they're really, really good warriors and stuff like that. But they end up capturing Paul and Jessica, and at first you think they're going to kill them, and then they don't. Because Jessica shows that she's like a very good warrior. Paul shows that he's a good warrior. And the Fremen accept them into their society. Stilgar is the leader of the Fremen at the time. His niece is Chani. She is, I guess, supposed to be next in line to rule or something. I don't know, but basically Stilgar is the leader of the Fremen, and Chani is his niece, and Paul likes her, and sees possible futures with Chani. But basically Paul and Jessica are accepted by the Fremen, and people start to understand that Paul might be the Lisan al-Gaib. He's showing his, hyper-intelligence. One of the rites of passage of becoming a Fremen is riding a sandworm, and he does it, like, really well. They start seeing him as one of their own, and they start respecting him. It's a very, like, coming-of-age type of story. And something happens where Jessica needs to consume water essence that's directly from a sandworm. So it's, like, incredibly spice-induced. She does that and essentially becomes a Reverend Mother for the Fremen. She's pregnant at the time with Leto's baby, and unbeknownst to her, that that ability, that Reverend Mother ability, is passed on to her baby in the womb as well. And that's something that's kind of very important. So basically, she is now a Reverend Mother. She can now reference knowledge and she read knowledge and memory of her past ancestry in the Bene Gesserit. And something that she doesn't realize is her baby, her unborn baby in her stomach, can do that now as well and gains that ability. Paul, with the help of the Fremen, decide to retake the planet Dune. So he inspires the Fremen to help him attack the Harkonnens and the Emperor when the Emperor comes for a visit to Arrakis or something, to retake the planet Dune for himself and to become Emperor. So, using House Atomics, which, it's illegal. It's not supposed to happen, but he uses house atomics to put down the shield wall, and he and the Fremen ride worms into the city of Arrakeen, or the capital of Arrakis, I guess. And he retakes Arrakis and defeats the Emperor, becomes Emperor of the known universe, and declares that he will take Princess Irulan, which is the Emperor's daughter, as his wife, but she will not be his wife. She will only be his wife in name and for political purposes. His real wife will be Chani, and she will be the one that will bear his children. Irulan will be nothing to him, just a political piece, almost a hostage. And that's kind of the end of the first book. It's kind of a story of the kind of the hero's journey, right? Like, gets everything taken from him, builds a culture, finds his place in this other culture, these other people, and then kind of, and then the climax is him getting everything back and then becoming emperor, and blah blah blah. So that, in a nutshell, is the first book. Dune Messiah is a bore fest. Dune Messiah basically flips the hero's journey on its head, where the hero's journey ends with the hero getting the happy ending. Dune Messiah is about how after that climb, after the hero has gotten everything he could possibly want, how it's not all it's cracked up to be. So Paul is seen as this Messiah, and he has to rule as emperor. You can see all these possible futures, and it's just him ruling isn't going all that well. And the Bene Gesserit have formed a pact with the Tleilaxu to assassinate him. So there's plots to assassinate Paul. Irulan is part of his fake wife is part of the plot to kill him. The Tleilaxu and who have face dancers, people who can disguise themselves as anything, are part of it. And they're trying to kill Paul, and his rule over Arrakis and the known universe isn't going super great. And he can see futures that aren't all that great. And his sister, I should have mentioned in the previous book, his sister Aelia is born, and again she has hyper intelligence powers. Like her mom, she can reference back through her ancestry. So she's hyper intelligent, and she's trying to rule with him, and she's kind of a badass. She can fight really well, and she's hyper intelligent, like he is. And then Duncan Idaho is reincarnated. So there's multiple plots on his life. One is through Irulan and the Bene Gesserit and Scytale. The Tleilaxu, he's known as Scytale, one of the Tleilaxu representatives who's trying to kill Paul. His name is Scytale. They reincarnate Duncan Idaho, who Paul loved. Not in an intimate way, but like best friends type of thing. So they reincarnate Duncan Idaho as a Jola, which is they grew him from cells of the dead Duncan Idaho. And he's basically a sleeper agent. They're basically there's a phrase that Paul will say at some point that will trigger Duncan Idaho to kill Paul. But they reincarnate him, and Paul gets to know him. Aelia, Paul's sister, falls in love with him. The Duncan Idaho clone, I'll just say clone because I don't want to say Jola. I don't know if it's Jola or Gola, but whatever. The Duncan Idaho clone doesn't have the memories of Duncan Idaho yet, but he knows he was Duncan Idaho at one point, and I think his temporary name is Hyatt or Hyatt, Hyatt or something, but he is Duncan Idaho, and I don't know, he doesn't have Duncan Idaho's memories yet, so he's not Duncan Idaho, but he's getting there, and he has a sense of who he was. And basically what ends up happening is Paul has been trying to get Chani pregnant Rulon has been giving Chani uh, um, what is it? What is it when you don't want to have a baby? She's been giving her suppressants in her food so that she can't have a kid with Paul. Contraceptive, there we go. God, she's been giving her contraceptives, a contraceptive thing, an impregnation suppressant in her food. But basically, Chani gets pregnant anyway, and then Duncan Idaho Chani dies in childbirth. She gives birth to twins. Paul only thought he was going to have a daughter, but he ends up having a daughter and a son. He didn't see the son, and he doesn't know how to feel about the son because he didn't see it, which, he can see possible futures. How did he not see the son? But anyway, so she has a son and daughter, but she dies in childbirth. Paul says she's gone, which is the trigger word for Duncan Idaho, or the clone to kill him. But the clone is so enamored, so admires Paul, that when the memories of Duncan Idaho comes back and he doesn't kill him. So Scytail, he doesn't kill him. Then I don't actually, at some point, there's another attempt on Paul's life where they use, I think, atomics or some sort of laser gun to try to kill him. It misses, but it does enough damage, and I guess the blast can blind you. So Paul gets blinded by the blast, but he's so hyper intelligent that he can quote unquote see still. He can perceive so well with just his ears and intelligence that he knows other people are blind, and he can walk around as if he's not blind. So yeah, that happens. And then Paul goes to meet his twins, and Scytail, who was part of the original plot to kill him, puts a knife to his son's throat, or maybe it's, to his son's throat, or maybe I forget. Scytail tries to kill either the children or Paul, but Paul ends up being able to see through Leto's eyes. Leto, the second, is his son, and Ganima is his daughter. Those are the twins. So he's able to see through their eyes or something, and he ends up throwing a knife, killing Scytail. And then the end of the book is kind of, in the Fremen society, if you're blind, you're supposed to walk out into the desert and essentially be food for sandworms. Sandworms also called Shai Halud. So yeah, people think basically Paul goes in obedience or in accordance with that law of their culture, and says because he's blind, he will disappear into the desert and be gone forever. And when the time is right, his children, Leto and Ganima, will rule in his stead. But yeah, Paul basically goes into the desert and disappears, and that's the end of Dune Messiah. Children of Dune. I liked this one more than Dune Messiah. So Children of Dune, much like the title would imply, is about the story of Leto the second, his son, and Ganima, Paul's son, and Ganima, Paul's daughter, through Chani, the twins. So, Aelia, Paul's sister, has been ruling Arrakis in his stead. Or, not just Arrakis, but I guess she's kind of regent. She's not emperor, but she's emperor in all but name. She's ruling, she's ruling the known universe in Paul's name until his children come of age. And Leto and Ganima are his children. They're grown up. They're being raised as Fremen by Stilgar. Stilgar's still alive. So they're being raised as Fremen by Stilgar until such a time as they are ready to rule. They're hyper intelligent, just like their aunt. They can see into the past ancestry. They're just everything comes back to hyper intelligence. They're just super smart. They can perceive stuff, see possible futures. They can see into their into their past, into their ancestry. Supposedly the Atreides go back to Agamemnon. I think at the time of the they're 9 years old or something. They're really young, and at that age, they're participating in Fremen orgies and stuff. So it's like pretty fucking weird shit. But like they're 9-year-olds with the brains of obviously millennia. So they're they behave well beyond their age or how old they look. So Aelia has been ruling and the known universe, and she starts to act erratically, and there's a reason for that. We'll get into it. But she starts to kind of fall apart, and she starts becoming suspicious of her mother, Lady Jessica, who is also still alive, and she's nervous about the children, Leto and Ganima. And there's also rumors of unrest under her rule. A lot of it caused by this man called the Preacher, who is a blind Fremen from the desert, hint hint, wink wink, who's causing a lot of unrest, and he's challenging the words and wisdom and knowledge of Paul Atreides, and she doesn't like that. She doesn't want her rule undermined and stuff like that. And essentially what ends up happening is she starts becoming possessed by the memory, because she can refer back to all these, her ancestors. One of the fears of the ability to do that in the Bene Gesserit is that those memories, that knowledge can overwhelm and overcome and even start to control you. So those past lives can start to possess you. And the Bene Gesserit say that, obviously if you start getting possessed, it's an abomination. The Fremen have, stuff about possession. But essentially she starts getting possessed by the memory of the Vladimir Baron Harkonnen. So she starts becoming oppressive. She starts gaining weight. She starts being lustful. It's also important to note she ended up marrying the Duncan Idaho clone. So Duncan Idaho starts losing faith in her. And at some point, there's also a side plot. The Carino family, so the Emperor, his family, Princess Arulon, when Paul walked out into the desert, at the end of Messiah, Paul walks out into the desert. Arulon, once he walks into the desert, realizes she actually loved him and becomes devoted to him, and decides to raise Ganima and Leto alongside Aelia and what have you. So she ends up actually being infatuated and loves Paul. So in Children of Dune, Arulon is devoted to raising Ganima and Leto. But her sister, Princess Winesha, is still very upset that the Emperor Padisha was overthrown by Paul and plans to kill Paul's children, Leto and Ganima. She decides to do this with her Sardaukar commander. His name is Tekanik or something. They plan on using what are called Laza tigers to kill Leto and Ganima. Essentially what they do is they put these specific outfits on children and then have the Laza tigers devour them. Pretty fucked up. And they end up sending a bunch of these suits to Leto and Ganima, and then put the Laza tigers on Dune to hunt them when they wear them and kill them. Leto and Ganima are both aware that there's going to be an attack on their life. The Laza tigers fail miserably at killing them. They end up killing the Laza tigers really easily. But Leto and Ganima decide that to gain an advantage on their enemies, they're going to say that Leto died. Well, essentially, we'll backpedal a little bit. Before the Laza tiger attack, Leto and Ganima have what's the word? Not mutation, meditation. They end up having a meditation session. And Leto discovers what he calls the Golden Path. And that's going to be very, very important. So he sees a future that he deems necessary for humanity. And to get, so they see this golden path, or he sees this golden path and knows he must pursue it. So when the Laza tigers attack, part of the golden path path is for people to believe he was killed and that he didn't survive. And Ganima goes back to everybody and tells them that he's dead, and she actually has like her brain turn off the memories of him surviving, so that she believes he's dead. So if a truthsayer, which is like a Bene Gesserit, or like a hyper-intelligent person who can perceive if you're lying, if a truthsayer asks her if he's dead, it seems like she's telling the truth. So he pretends to be, or, she pretends he's dead, and he goes off into the desert to look for Jakuritu. He's basically, I don't really know what he's looking for, but I guess in his future visions he saw that he needed to go to this like ancient and kind of like forbidden place on Dune, where like smugglers and stuff go. I don't know. Aelia is like unraveling and like very, very much becoming overtaken by this memory of the Baron Vladimir O'Conan. So Duncan Idaho leaves her and takes Lady Jessica, her mother, to the Carinos, and Lady Jessica starts training Farad'n, who is the son of Wanisha, Urulan's sister. So Princess Urulan, Paul's fake wife, who ends up becoming devoted to him. Wanisha is Urulan's sister, who hates Paul and his family for taking, the empire away from them, and is the one planning to kill Paul's children. Wanisha's son is Farad'n, who she's planning to give, the power of the emperor. She plans on making him emperor once Paul and Paul's lineage is dead. Farad'n was unaware of the Laza tiger attack. He didn't know any of that. He's actually he almost reminds me a bit of Paul. Like, he's very inquisitive, very smart, wants to learn. And Duncan Idaho basically brings Lady Jessica to Salasa Secundus, where the Carino family, Farad'n and Wanisha, are. And Wanisha, Technique agree that Lady Jessica can train Farad'n to be to train kind of like a Bene Gesserit, so that he can be smarter and be a better emperor. What they don't know is she's training him to be a Bene Gesserit. But that's neither here nor there. Either way, it's slowly, you think Farad'n, you gain respect for Farad'n because he didn't want to kill Leto and Ganima, and he wasn't part of that plot. And also, he's inquisitive, he's trying to learn. What you don't know, obviously, is that Lady Jessica is, molding him into, essentially, a Bene Gesserit, or a devotee of the Bene Gesserit. So anyway, Leto is captured as he's out in the desert by agents of Aelia, his aunt, Paul's sister, who's the regent ruling Dune. She ends up, kind of having him tortured, and she ends up, having his people, or her people, forcefully make him ingest, tons and tons of spice. So he essentially goes on, a spice trip. And his golden path and his future and all that, he sees it all unravel, and he realizes that he needs to do something in order for it to happen. He needs to sacrifice something in order for the golden path to unfold. So he ends up escaping his captors, and he wanders naked out into the desert. And he has, so the life cycle of the sandworm, I don't really understand, but they start as sand trout, so almost like a small fish. And then slowly, over time, the sand trout likes water, and then slowly over time they become the sandworm, and they hate water. Sand trout, small fish, sandworm, giant worm, giant big thing. So what he ends up doing is he goes out and he starts taking these sand trout, and he starts attaching them to himself. So he slips one of the sand trout over his arms, and he puts another one over his other arm, and they start melding with him. And the initial effects of this are he becomes superhuman. He can jump, he can jump a building in a single bound. He can break rock off of a face and throw an entire he's like super strong, super fast, and he ends up starting to grow silica, so essentially like hard rock, or almost like hard fleshy surface starts forming on his skin. Initially it's, it's not much, it's just small sprouts of it, almost like armor, and it probably looks pretty fucking cool. And he starts dismantling all of Alia's defenses, and then he confronts Alia, and the Alia that existed, Paul's sister, is so have you seen Get Out? Like in Get Out, you know how, like well, whatever. Basically, the persona that is Alia is so receded into her mind, and Vladimir Harkonnen is so put forward that like Alia almost doesn't exist anymore. But Leto is able to get through to that Alia that still exists within that body. And for a moment, Alia is back in her body and realizes she needs to kill herself to end and kill the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen once and for all. So she jumps from a tower and dies. And Leto declares that he will be now Emperor of the known universe, and he is going to marry. It ends up happening that, like, when everybody thought Leto was dead, Farad'n was going to marry Ganima, and Farad'n would be Emperor, and Ganima would be his wife. Leto then comes back, everybody knows Leto's alive. Leto declares he will be Emperor of the known universe, and he will marry Ganima. Fucked up, I know. But I don't know why that is necessary, but... So he marries Ganima, but Farad'n will be her concubine, essentially. Leto won't breed with Ganima. Farad'n will, so he almost, like, cuckolds himself. But it makes sense, right? Like, you don't want brother and sister to breed, so... But everybody will think Ganima's kids are their kids type of thing. I don't know, really, the relevance of that. But he renames Farad'n, like, Hark al-Ada or something, and he is the true, heir. He's the true, like, seed with which the next Atreides generation will be born from. And that's the end of Children of Dune. And then my favorite of the Dune series is God Emperor of Dune. So it becomes apparent Children of Dune, that Leto understands that he has to sacrifice something in order for humanity to be put on this golden path, this path that will lead humanity to a point where, lead humanity into the right direction, I guess you could say, in layman's terms. And what he had to sacrifice was his humanity, because this takes place 3,500 years after Children of Dune. So Children of Dune was 3,500 years ago. So 3,500 years after Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune takes place. Leto the Second, so the boy, the male twin of Children of Dune, has lived for 3,500 years, and the reason for that is when he put the sand trout on his body, when he melded himself with the sand trout, he started a metamorphosis where he essentially started to become a sandworm. So, after 3,500 years, he's essentially a massive sandworm, but instead of like a sandworm has like a big open maw with all these like teeth, instead of like a big open maw, it just closes at this like pinky flesh type thing, and all that's left is like, his head and some of it, he has his arms left. He has little, like, you can see on the body of the worm, there are little stubs that used to be what his legs were, or he calls them flippers, I think, a couple times, but, his legs have long since, degenerated and become part of the worm. So he's essentially a sandworm, but at the very top of the sandworm is what's left of, it's a human face. It even has, like, a cowl. It even has, like, flesh around it that, it can recede into and stuff like that, but he's a giant sandworm with a little bit of human left, little arms, little weak arms, and he has his face, maybe like a little bit of a torso. I always just see it as like a face kind of receded into skin with like, little arms kind of sticking out. But basically he's a giant sandworm now. But he basically has to sacrifice his humanity and start becoming a worm, start becoming this animal. He still has his hyperintelligence, but at some point he knows that that'll go away, and then he'll just be a worm or something. But he's not human anymore. He doesn't he doesn't have genitals. He doesn't have arms. Well, he has little arms, but he doesn't have a body of a human. But he is essentially a super being. He can't be killed. He's invulnerable, and he's like hyper intelligent, super powerful. Can see possible futures. Can see pasts. And he's still pushing humanity along on his golden path, which again is the path that he believes humanity needs to be put on in order for it to prevail, to succeed, to thrive. And he rules, so it's 3,500 years after Children of Dune. Ganima is long since dead, so is Farad'n and everybody else. But Duncan Idaho has been resurrected hundreds of times, presumably. Every time a Duncan Idaho is brought into being, or every time a Duncan Idaho clone dies, he has a new one made. So there's been Duncan Idahos for 3,500 years. Basically, he's been ruling the galaxy, or the universe, I should say, with an iron fist. He's been very oppressive. He has reduced the Bene Gesserit, he's reduced the Tully Laxu, the Ix, all of those factions that we discussed at the beginning, all of them have been reduced and their powers stripped away from them. Spice is incredibly rare. Nobody can use it anymore. He might have stores of it somewhere, but like the melange, the spice is essentially gone. It like almost doesn't exist anymore. And so it's 3,500 years later, and one of the offspring of Ganima and Farad'n, 3,500 years later, so, there was a long time away, but Maneo is an Atreides descendant of Ganima and Farad'n, and Sonia is his daughter. Maneo used to be a rebel, but is no longer a rebel and now works for the God Emperor. It's not Sonia, what is it? What's her name? Siona. I'm sorry, Siona. Maneo used to be a rebel and used to fight the God Emperor, fight the oppression, but then is now working for the God Emperor. Siona, his daughter, is a rebel. And basically, the novel starts with her finding these journals in his palace and trying to get them translated to find a weakness in the God Emperor. She loses a bunch of friends in doing so, and she works with a lot of different people, I think like the Tully Laxu or maybe the Ix, the Ixians. She's like working with all these different factions, who are all trying to take down the God Emperor. They're all subservient, but like they all want to find a way around it because they're being oppressed. And they want, and they want answers. They want to know why he's doing what he's doing, and why did he sacrifice his youth? Why did he become a worm, and all this other stuff. And that he did it because of his perceived golden path. It's not really clear what the golden path is or leads to until later in the novel. And I've kind of already given it away, but essentially he's looking for humanity to succeed, and that he knows that it requires them to be oppressed for a long time to then want freedom enough to be creative enough to defeat him. So he's like intentionally sacrificing his humanity and his life for humanity to then go on without him. Again, they don't, the rebels don't know that. Siona doesn't know that. Maneo kind of knows it. But the rebels are looking for a weakness to defeat him, and essentially, like, that's kind of the start of the golden path, or kind of the start of the golden path. So, he's ruling with an iron fist. He has a new, his newest version of Duncan Idaho. He's like trying to train and teach to like perceive the golden path and like understand what he's doing and why. There's a lot of philosophical discussion in the book. Leto kind of like a lot of exposition. There's a lot of dialogue in this book compared to the others. Leto basically, trying to explain to people and guide people along the golden path, along can free themselves from him and from the shackles of non-intelligence, I guess, of I don't know. But there's a lot of exposition. Leto has created a faction of people called the Fish Speakers, which is an all-female army that is completely devoted to him and see him as a god. Basically, so the rebels have a plot to try to like kill him, and they end up finding a weakness in the journals. They know that part of him is still human, so they know he can love. So the Ixians create, or maybe the Tulilaxu, I don't know. Basically, no, I think it's the Ixians. The Ixians eventually like create this female this woman called Hui Nori, who they know is like, she is the epitome. She is the pinnacle. She is created to entice and to seduce and to make Leto fall in love with her, and he does, and he knows it. But he falls in love with her anyway. And she falls in love with him because she kind of understands that he has sacrificed his humanity. And she doesn't really know, nobody really knows why until, like, I think the end of the book, but nobody really knows why, but she understands that he did it, and she thinks it's for a good reason. So she loves him because she knows that he's done something that has isolated him, and left him without love, and, he had to sacrifice everything in order for the greater good, which is, admirable. So, he loves her, she loves him, but obviously he doesn't have genitals. He can't, there's no physical love between them. But, he has kind of taken the Bene Gesserit breeding program thing where they were trying to, like, breed people to create the Kwisatz Haderach. He's been doing the same thing, but with Atreides, to find an Atreides that will essentially, I think, like, overthrow him. So he is kind of doing his own breeding program. And he tells her that, like, she can breed with somebody, but he wants to be able to choose the father. He also has plans for breeding with Siona and the Duncan Idaho clone, because he's again trying to create the Atreides that will, like, overthrow him. And Duncan Idaho is like, I won't be your bull, or not your bull, I won't be your stud, like, I'm not just, like, a sperm donor for you. And, like, Duncan kind of hates Leto. And, like, Duncan and Hui kind of, like, have a thing, and Leto, the God Emperor, gets jealous about it. There's an attempt on Hui's life, and the God Emperor, like, there are times when the worm part of him takes over, and he, like, loses his humanity entirely, just becomes a raging worm. He just, like, thrashes and kills people. There's, like, a procession to a new city. It's like every 10 years there's, like, this celebration, and the God Emperor, like, communes with fish speakers, and they have, I don't know if it's like an orgy or like a communal, like, ritual type thing, but he, like, meets with these, fish speakers, and they all kind of have this, like, ritual, and then the God Emperor tells everybody he's gonna marry Hui Nori. He hasn't taken a wife for a long time, so it's kind of like news. Duncan Idaho is upset because he loves Hui, so there's kind of like a love triangle going on. Hui and Duncan end up fucking, and that, like, the God, I don't know if Leto ever ends up finding that out, but, like, either way, like, Hui knows that she can't be with Duncan. She has to marry Leto. And at some point, Leto tests Siona to see if she's ready, or to see if she's worthy of knowing the golden path. So he takes her out into the desert, and she has to survive on her own. She drinks some of his water, which is sandworm water, which is, like, again, like, if you think back to the first Dune, it's like the Reverend Mother water that makes you able to perceive your past ancestry and stuff like that. She drinks it, and she's able to perceive the golden path. So she ends up working for the God Emperor, but still not really working for him. She agrees to command his fish speaker army. But she won't breed with Duncan Idaho. But, like, she still ends up planning to betray him. This whole time she's had a fish speaker guard with her that is kind of a double agent for the God Emperor. But Leto has said that she needs to obey Siona, and so Nayla, the fish speaker guard for Siona, is sworn to do whatever Siona says, but that'll become important later. So basically, Siona sees the golden path and sees what he was trying to achieve, I guess, but still plans on betraying him. And then when Leto's procession with Huinori is on its way to their wedding place, which is a town in the desert, a Fremen town, they have to go over a bridge, and as they were out in the desert, Siona and Leto, when he was testing her, Siona saw that he was very susceptible or vulnerable to water. So this bridge goes over a river, and Siona tells Nayla, the fish speaker guard, that she must use a laser gun to essentially destroy the bridge, making everybody on the bridge, Leto, Hui, her own, Siona's father, Maneo, they all fall into the river and will die. Nayla sees this as an ultimate test from the God Emperor, thinking that he won't die. So she obeys Siona, she destroys the bridge, and Leto, Hui, Maneo, all fall into the water. Presumably all the people who fell into the water are dead. I guess it's a high drop. Leto falls into the water and essentially dies. He washes up. The worm body disintegrates and becomes sand trout again, and the sand trout go out into the desert. It's also important to note, I guess it's not incredibly important, but Dune has transformed a lot since being a desert planet. It was a big desert planet, obviously, in the first book. In Messiah, it starts to grow some greenery. In Children of Dune, it becomes even more green. In God Emperor, there's very little desert left. It's almost all green and forests and rivers and all this. So he falls. His body disintegrates, and the sand trout go into the little bit of desert that's left. And what you realize is it was all part of his plan. He wanted Siona to overthrow him. He wanted to die. And the sand trout that are left, that kind of come when his body dissolves, the sand trout that go out into the desert will become worms, and within each worm he has a pearl of his knowledge. And when humanity is ready, they will find those pearls, and if they study the journals that she stole at the beginning and stuff like that, they'll learn, and then they'll become creative and free again. So with his dying breaths, you kind of come to understand that. And that is God Emperor of Dune. So I just started rereading Heretics again, and basically, that takes place 1,500 years after Leto is dead. But basically what ends up happening is, I'll just let you know, as far as a resolution on God Emperor, the Golden Path is achieved because he wanted humanity to kind of scatter out into the universe, and, well, I guess it's not fully achieved yet, necessarily. But he wanted humankind to overthrow him, to want freedom, freedom from his oppression, and then to go out into the universe, which is called the scattering, when, all these races, all these factions, have people called the Lost Ones that just go out into the universe. Some come back and some don't, but, they just go out into the universe and tread new ground and have freedom to be creative and free. So yeah, that is the story of Dune, from the first novel to the fourth novel. God Emperor is probably my favorite. I love the character of the God Emperor Duke, or the God Emperor Leto II. I love seeing a character that is all powerful, but had to sacrifice everything. He's all powerful, but it's a burden, right? He's all powerful, but he only is doing it because he knows he has to, and he has to be a bad person. He has to be an oppressive ruler in order for humanity to survive and to succeed. So of the four God Emperors, probably probably my favorite. Obviously, followed, well, not obviously. God Emperor is probably my favorite. Dune is probably my second favorite. Then Children of Dune, then Messiah, so far. I'm on Heretics right now. It's interesting enough, but it's starting to get real wacky. There's like dogs there's like chair dogs, which is like living furniture. It's like it's a dog chair. It's a chair that's a dog that's a chair that's a dog. So it's like a furry chair, I guess. I don't know. And there's like these honored Matrice, who is a new faction that come in. There's an offshoot of the Bene Gesserit that instead of using hyper-intelligence to dominate the universe, they use sex. So it's a bunch of space dominatrixes. So it's starting to get kind of like, and honestly, from one to the next, to the next, to the next, sex becomes a very increasingly important theme, which is kind of weird. Like, you know, it's breeding programs and stuff, and then like Children of Dune and stuff, and God Emperor, like, you know, it's just, sex seems to be becoming more and more important. And now that I'm reading Heretics, and there's like fucking space dominatrixes, like I'm starting to, it's almost becoming smut at this point, and I'm starting to think Frank got a little too horny as he was reading these, but still 1 through 4, like if you're gonna read a portion, like again, Heretics seems to be kind of going off the rails. It's interesting enough, but like if you want like a very interesting story start to finish, I would say, or like, you know what, an interesting arc, this is a great one. I just wish, I mean, obviously God Emperor doesn't end with the scattering. You learn about it in Heretics. If God Emperor kind of told you that there was a scattering, I think it would be a good, you know, like these 4 books would be like a perfect arc, you know, like Hero's Journey. It's not all that's Hero's Journey. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Next Generation, and then like, you know, kind of almost like a Next Generation that sees the hero's journey and all this, and sees the downfall of all this bullshit, and sees what's necessary for humanity, and then that leads to this, and then this is kind of that final resolution on, you know, what it took, the sacrifices it took to get humanity into a good place. So yeah, that's it. You know, that's Dune in a nutshell. And that, yeah, I don't know. For those of you who are fans of the books, who have read them, and you know I forgot stuff, like, I'm sorry. Like, if I misinterpreted or misexplained something, you know, I've had a couple beers, and I'm just really, I'm trying to give a summary, and a summary that can be understood, in a, you know, somewhat meaningful way. But I did my best. I didn't, you know, I could have done this really, really well, and like planned ahead and written a script and all that, but I like doing stuff stream of consciousness. So, you know, if you're here for like scripted, high level, in-depth, you know, content, that's not my style. I'm very like off the cuff, stream of consciousness, and on the fly type of guy. That being said, I would love to do something structured at some point, but like I don't have time. If I ever have time, I would love to do something more like essay style, but I just don't have time, and I'm sorry about that. But yeah, that is Dune, and I love these books. I love the story of Leto, and the story of Paul is cool too, but I don't know, these books are awesome. Highly recommend them. Yeah, even though I've given you the gist and like the kind of the major story beats of each book, I would still highly recommend giving them a read. There's so much to be pondered. There's so much to reflect on when it comes to like humanity, philosophy, government. There's a lot to reflect on and a lot to understand and to enjoy. And there's space dominatrixes by the time you get to book 5, so like, fuck yeah, dude. But yeah, they're great. I'd highly recommend them. It is literally some of the best sci-fi out there. a nod to the author, to Frank Herbert. His writing, he's really, really good at it. Like, I mean, obviously all these, like, concepts and stuff, all this, you might think is overwhelming, but the way that Frank Herbert writes, you know, if you're not a big sci-fi person and you're nervous about not understanding, you know, science fiction and it, you know, being, not that science fiction is, like, really cerebral or anything like that, but, like, I understand, like, if you don't know, it's hard to imagine things that don't exist and, like, you know, functionally, like a chair dog. Not necessarily, a chair dog's probably pretty easy to figure out, but you get my point. Like, science fiction for some people can be daunting because it's, like, you know, different and, you know, it's hard to imagine, you know, things that are kind of futuristic or whatever. But the way Frank Herbert writes makes it extremely digestible, and it almost comes across as familiar. In some ways, like, you can almost understand and perceive some of the things that are written, like an ornithopter and stuff like, I don't know, it's really easy to perceive in your mind's eye. I don't know what it is about his writing, but something you just, as you're reading, you just unknowingly get an understanding of the world, and the, the different aspects and technologies and stuff like that. It's almost familiar, which is interesting. It's not an effort to, like, figure out what things are. You just kind of read, and they're explained in a vague and specific enough way that you can figure out what it all is. So I don't know if that was a compliment, but it's just I don't know. They're great books. Frank Herbert's a great writer. Again, maybe a little too horny by the end, but at least these four are very content-wise awesome, and I think there's a lot to be consumed here. Then again, I'm only at the start of Heretics, and I still have Chapter House and stuff like that. So there's more to read. So I mean, I'm obviously being a little bit overcritical of the later books, but these four. I mean, if you're gonna read this, get to God Emperor, because it's amazing, and I think it's a great resolution to the story. And again, it's my personal favorite. But yeah. So yeah, that is Dune. Thank you guys so much for watching. I think we're at like 370 subscribers or something, which is fucking mind blowing. I can't believe, I can't believe we've gotten this far. But I thank you all for watching. I hope that, if you like content like this, if you liked something like this, I'm more than willing to do more of it. Dune is just Dune, and like thinking about Dune and wanting to talk about Dune has been on my mind for weeks. So now that I've actually been able to say it out loud, and some of you might actually watch this video, some of you to the very end, that would be awesome, because then I'm not just talking in a room by myself. But yeah, I love these books. I love the series. So for those of you who have stuck around, for those of you who have liked, subscribed, and enjoyed my content and stuff like that, thank you so much. I can't believe we are where we are. And I love, and I am so thankful that I have people out there that are willing to listen to me talk about things I'm passionate about, like Dune and the series, the collection of books by Frank Herbert. So yeah, thank you all so much.